Welcome everyone to Belmont Poetry Night. I've taken to lighting a candle at the beginning of our evening together to show some reverence for the time that we have put together, taken to join each other, and for the light that poetry shines in our lives during these darker times. My name is Jacki Rigoni, and I am the Poet Laureate for Belmont, California. I also acknowledge that as unceded Ohlone land. Tonight, I also want to acknowledge Black History Month, a month I've dedicated to favorite Black poets in the past, though that won't be the case tonight. What I do want to say in honor of Black History Month is to encourage you to read the poems of our new San Francisco Poet Laureate, Tongo Eisen Martin. And he's an amazing person to read, and he has many speaking engagements now that he's the San Francisco Poet Laureate. So I encourage you to check out his work. Belmont Poetry Night is hosted on the third Tuesday of the month, usually at the Belmont Library, but we've discovered that by meeting on Zoom due to our current circumstances, it has allowed us to have visitors from Canada and from Brooklyn, and last month we even had listeners in from India. So it's a little bit of a blessing in disguise that we are not meeting at the Belmont Library, because we are able to have people join us in poetry from all around the world. It has been my honor to host Belmont Poetry Night for the past 3 years, serving as Belmont Poet Laureate, and to show my deep appreciation for this community here. I am pleased to feature one of our poets who has consistently shown up with her insightful poetry and in support of fellow poets. And we will have our feature reader up first, and then it'll be followed by open mic. We have a full roster and time for one poem each for our open mic portion. And for those of you who have emailed me beforehand to read, I have you on my list. I will put the reading order in the chat when that time comes. And if you emailed me and you're not on that list, please also let me know in the chat. I'm known to drop off a few eager participants from time to time, so please excuse me. Otherwise, just sit back and enjoy. And since everyone but the person speaking will be on mute, we have a few ways to show our appreciation. And so if you're not on mute right now, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself. And what we like to do is to show appreciation by, first of all, we have the American Sign Language sign for applause, which is a great way to let the reader know that you appreciate their reading. And also, we like to use the chat box where you can show your gratitude. And my favorite way to show that is by typing a line or a phrase from the poem being read that especially speaks to you. Go ahead and just go down and mute some folks here just to keep things quiet. If you don't, give me 1 second. I'm also the tech guy. Great. Okay, so go ahead and please use the chat box to give encouragement, to write a phrase or a line that really strikes you, and let the poet know what you especially appreciate about their reading. So I'm so glad you're here. And I'd love to know in the chat box where you're from. And because we're celebrating all of the people, or some of the poets who have been here at Belmont Poetry Night for the 3 years that I've been here and even before, can you let me know how long you've been coming to Belmont Poetry Night? And if you're new or here for the first time to see our featured poet, welcome, and let us know that too. Great to see you all here. I also want to especially acknowledge Mirna's husband and daughters who are here to support her. So our featured reader tonight. Hang on, let me just want to mute a few people here just because one of the reasons we also have you muted is that when we do the recording, if you're not muted, it'll actually show you on the screen because the Zoom thinks that you're reading because of your sound there. So, great. So, enough ado about all of that. So, I'm so delighted to welcome Mirna Hirschl. She's our featured reader tonight in this special series featuring the dedicated poets who have made Belmont Poetry Night a thriving community. A native of Croatia, which is former Yugoslavia, Mirna Hirschl grew up through World War II and the communism that follows, themes that occasionally show up in her poems one way or another. Coming to poetry late in life, I was so fascinated to read that she had a career in computer science in New York for years before she moved here to the Bay Area. Mirna draws on the specificity of her life to touch others with what is human and familiar. She is so beloved in local poetry communities, as you can see here by all of those who have shown up to hear her. And she's had poems published in Warm Hot Bread and local anthology. So please welcome Mirna Hirschl to read with us tonight. It looks like you're on mute there, Mirna. Can you unmute yourself?
No,
there you go. Okay. Take it away, Mirna.
Thank you. First of all, it's truly great to see you all, friends and fellow poets and family, and I am excited. So it's a wonderful event. I particularly want to thank you, Jacki, for organizing this event in the first place, and also encouraging me all along. You were our Belmont Poet Laureate now for what, 2 or 3 years, right? Yeah, 3 wonderful years, and everybody really enjoyed coming, and it was just wonderful for our community as well. My special thanks also, I can see some faces came from Cupertino Poetry Circle. Until I joined Cupertino Poetry Circle, I was basically writing poetry for myself and then read it to myself. They were wonderful to me, really welcomed me, and I thank them. And now without much ado, I will just go in because we need to cover a lot of territory. So here's the first poem that really is sort of about what poetry means to me. Roaming through the unprepared spaces. Oh, my beloved poems, I give you a story. You reveal its meaning. I trust you. You know me better than I know myself. When I'm lost in gloomy thoughts, you shine the beam, dispel the fog, until my naked soul blinks in front of me, unaccustomed to the light so strong. My tender eyes, my vulnerable soul. Gone are the tempting ways of mundane that fix my gaze so it cannot penetrate beyond evasive, fuzzy shapes. Gone the fears, the uncertainties. Emboldened, I push away the limiting horizon to fathom what lies behind my silvery mirror, my oxidized life. Then, if I do envision the unseen, I will roam through unprepared spaces, waiting for an epiphany or another poem. The next poem I want to read to you will take us straight into some events that I experienced as a child in Croatia. And it's called The Tales of a Walnut Tree. The walnut tree in the title is the tree that I loved that was in my grandfather's backyard. The Tales of a Walnut Tree. To Paula, my first friend. Around the walnut tree, the grass was plush, a sprawling pillow of soft summer shade. There, pretty Nezzy, the lisp of her nickname, a souvenir of happier days, sat alone and brooded and regretted. Today he sought her again and said, "Look here, Nezzy, I brought you a basket of fresh strawberries." She answered, "No, thank you," and chilled his soul. He knew she wanted to ask, "Where were you last night?" But the words would not pass her embittered lips. He left the basket on the grass. She left it to the birds. 2. Under the same walnut tree, their naughty son offered plum brandy to a willing goat that lapped it up and butted its ebony horns into the living tree until they broke and oozed a trail of blood down the carved up trunk. The boy was whipped, and the three of them, the boy, the goat, and the trunk, remained scarred. 3. Years later, the granddaughter ran her fingers along the misshapen grooves of dark, wounded walnut bark, waiting for a friend who never came. "It was the last night's raid that killed the girl next door," the neighbor said, and pointed toward a huge hole in the ground, gaping and confirming, malevolent and unforgettable. The tree split in half. The flying earth bared its roots and shaped them into spikes of a broken wheel, arrested in midair. 70 years ago, we shelled walnuts together. The unripe, bitter skin stained ours with iodine that turned rusty brown. That's all I can remember. No face, only the stained fingers and the name. Only Poland. Now, these were sad times, but there were also some wonderful times, particularly when I was on vacation, which happened once a year for a whole month in a beautiful town called Rovinj in Istria, which is in today's Croatia. And this is titled The Blue Fan. Wheels played rumba on the tracks. Baramba, baramba, ramba. 13, and on vacation, a notebook of empty pages, the face leaning out the window, the wind dwindling in my hair. The sea appeared from nowhere, an inverted triangle of Asia, just a mere slit at first. Then a large blue fan exploded into an aquamarine expanse whose shimmer wounded me. No other sea could be so lovely. It made my longings smell of salt and colored them blue. Slowly and deliberately, the train glided into station, folding away the view. All my life, I searched for that blue fan in different oceans. I made my own private waves, smashed them into 1,000 gems, and gazed into eyes of cobalt, spellbinding but false. I pondered the trembling tide pools trapped by the receding seas, the schools of silver specks, too warm for their scaly habits, swarmed and waited for a swell to take them home. I waited with them. I still wait. Past all tides, I wait for water to wear the right shade of blue. It never does. It never will. But my bewitched heart obeys the spell of a blue fan. Okay. Now I'm taking you a bit further. This has to do about starting new life in the United States, remotely, but it does. In the space of fantasy, borderless, mauled by the waves which roll me, I shed my soul like an old fence about to fall. Now that I know who I am not, no tribe or belief will ever own me. I shall bounce again upon dry land and draw once more the strength from the simplicity of a wild trillium. In wonderment, my eyes will swim that there may be so much power in a minimal arrangement of a simple flower, tiny in the space of fantasy. I think I'll change order a little bit. I hope Diane is there. I want to read this poem to my mother because Diane, one of my daughters, she needs to leave at 7:30 for work, and I want to make sure that she hears it. Baka means a grandmother, so it's a poem to my mother, and to my children, she was a baka. A portrait of Baka, snuggled in a woolen shawl, on a wooden spool rocking chair, a halo of wispy white hair rested on the subtly heaving breaths of her sunken chest. She offered her palms to balmy summer air, and everywhere sounds relented. The breeze ceased, the rocking chair calmed, the sun bent down and kissed her shoulders, took her by the hand and opened a dreamy gate. A book slipped from her lap and fell asleep in the crib of daisies. I hope that you were able to recognize her. Now we will go to our neighborhood. This was inspired by a special mimosa tree that I see on my walks on Avon Street. So the mimosa on Avon Street, 100 eyes bored through my back. The gaping knobs were staring at me from the trunk of a mimosa tree, bare but for few precocious buds sparsely dotting its denuded skin. The gaping knobs were staring at me through the scars implanted in the bark that marked a special kind of loss, perhaps of some aborted twins or axe's mutilation of the limbs. Through the scars implanted in the bark, the tree has laden me with great sadness. It resembled nature's tender rendering of a Magritte's painting, but more sinister, heartbreaking, and shockingly beautiful. The tree has laden me with great sadness. I tried to recall its previous splendor, but could not. The nagging impression, having left my eyes, has already settled deeper. Once more, fervently, I tried to recall its previous splendor, but could not. I tried to recall its previous splendor in a renewed spirit of forgiveness, hoping that the tree will bloom again and the golden clusters of velvety tufts will be oblivious to pain that bore them. In the new renewed spirit of forgiveness, the tree shall bask triumphant in the sun. Come with me down the Avon Street. Together, we'll soon forget the wounds and celebrate the coming of the spring. For those of you who are my fellow poets, you probably noticed that it's a variation on a pantoum form, where the second line in a stanza repeats itself in the first of the next stanza. Anyway, this is technical. Now I will read a poem that I didn't mean to read. It was not planned. But after the events of last week, I have decided that this is definitely relevant. We need to be reminded, and therefore I shall read it. A glimmer of hope in a nightmare. In this pitch black night, I suffocate in the fold of a loud, threatening cloud of lawyers' gowns swishing in arguments, and the politicians plotting and scheming. A heavy hand of time presses on my shoulder. A storm is gathering, the simple folk despairing. Stop squabbling, you rulers, rich, mighty, and crafty. Heed the seething mob below. Can you not foresee an avalanche of anger rising out of those numberless, nameless shoulders? Shudder, cushioned lives. Rewrite yourselves, O books of right and wrong. This ferment doesn't know of rules. Fear, you are justified to fill the hearts, make them race like rabbits. The horses will undomesticate themselves. The bison stampede over desiccated earth, and let no child's cradle be in their way, for accidents know not of guilt. Oh, Eisenstein, we need you to illuminate this foment. Record the silent screams before they are audible. Our nostrils, stand obtuse by good life, can't smell anything, not the spreading fires, not even the stench of dead sea lions beached on the petroleum-spilled black-tarred beaches. Numbed numb, how can we detect an odorless annihilation threat? It is almost morning. The light is seeping sheepishly into my room, shaken by a nightmare. Is that what it was? I dread to hear the news. Listen to bewildered grown-ups already resigned or about to resign. This time, it will take the youth to lift the world out of its demise. I will look for answers in my grandchildren's faces. How I long to see the sparks of elan in their clear, scintillating eyes, a determination settled in the stubborn jawlines. I will listen to their naive but sincere political arguments, watch the future brighten in their youthful expression. I think they will ripen well. In them only do I see the light. Do I have a few more minutes to finish, Jackie?
Certainly do.
Thank you. I want now to address poetry by elderly and for elderly. I don't think it's an extremely popular genre by any means, but I noticed some of the faces here of my friends and fellow poets and so on, that belong into this olden golden age group. So I think you might find that this resonates with you. There are two of them, two poems. One is called The Passage, and it addresses the things that elderly don't like, maybe even to think about, but certainly not to talk about. I feel it's important to talk about, so I will. The Passage. Few more years to be, maybe, to shuffle along old paths, to listen to friends reminisce, to carve the highlights of life into a memoir. Hurry, fold another paper airplane, hand it to a beloved child, and deliver one more advice, a desperate bid to give and leave more behind to ease the leave. Alma, you have such soft skin, but it is so different from mine. Yes, my darling, yours has softness of an apple blossom, mine of an apple left on the tree too long. The child runs off and carries away the questions and the giggles, and I'm left alone with my age. The fear flaps against my rib cage. Someday the unknown will come, a violent fall without a safety net, a crash, a last spasmodic pain, or a sheet of silent snowflakes falling from the windless sky, obliterating the landscape. However, we are still here, so we need to cope. The next poem is called Taking Off in Old Age. What to expect from myself lately, but to begin to forget? It is natural. The thoughts of this sort pursue me as the vines pursue a crumbling wall. I feared age would make it harder to reflect. It doesn't. Reflecting, like the fumes of fine wine, rises above details, names, dimensions. It mulls over the rooted feelings, flies on daring wings. But to find the precious, precise threads to weave into a tablecloth of poems can be daunting. Look inward, I tell myself. Indulge in the fruit that lives intact in your heart. Open wide your wrinkled hands. The words buried deep between the slits of arthritic joints live there precariously like wild columbines embracing steep cliffs. Do not let them slip. Support them with the synonyms, the similes. Plant the new seeds in the gently cultivated grooves of thoughts. Clothe a message in a freshly minted metaphor and take off. When the search is earnest, the find will be honest, a generous display of exuberance and sorrow. The last night's shoot will grow today's sapling, and the playful piping of a robin will rise out of yesterday's silence. This harvest I shall humbly deliver, grateful for the language of alternatives, the seed pods impatient, bursting under my feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirna. Such a beautiful reading and such a gift to be able to hear the poems, so many of your poems all together as one body of work. I've heard them through the years as individual pieces, and it feels like such an all-encompassing experience to hear so many aspects of you. I'm going to ask just a couple questions before we move on to the open mic. And the first one is that I heard you speak, maybe it was last year, about when I asked you about writing in English versus your native language. Do you remember that when we talked about that?
Very well.
And I thought it was fascinating, and she had so much insight about where you come from and where your work is now. And I'm wondering if you would share that about writing in English. Did you write poetry in your native languages, and what it's like to write and why you've chosen English as your language of poetry?
I did it for a few reasons. One, I have been here since 1962. I have been there much, much less. The language has also slipped away from me. The language that I speak now, the language of my childhood, the literary language then, has changed to a great extent. I don't want to get into ugly reasons such as political reasons, chauvinistic reasons. Let's not even go there. But it has changed. But also I have changed. I find it natural for me to write in English. And in fact, I have tried, for the sake of my friends who still live in Zagreb, I tried to do some work in Croatian. It sounded antiquated even to my ears, let alone to theirs. And they were kind enough to say, no, 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 but I know better. No. There is one thing that I definitely miss. No language translates into another language 100%. There is no such thing. Unfortunately, when I write about events, or if I'm inspired about the events that have happened then, or that I remember from when I was still in Croatia, sometimes the words uninvited pop in, and then I'm in really deep trouble because I simply cannot map them to any English word whatsoever. It doesn't work. On top of it, there are some things in Croatian, even though it's an extremely difficult language, but there is a great number of synonyms that are not quite the synonyms. They mean that you can only use those variations in a certain situation, but not in another. So whenever I try to express something like that, I just have to throw away the poem or come back to it 2 weeks later when I'm no longer thinking in those terms, because it's a stumbling block. Another problem also is that Croatian is an extremely onomatopoeic language. There are 300 words to express the murmuring of a brook. Well, good luck. It's difficult. On the other hand, if you are thinking about anything technological or philosophical or something like that, then it becomes a relatively poor language. So, you can see my difficulty. However, I write in English only. I was even brazen enough to attempt to write in Italian, which I did. And the same thing happened to me simply because I was on Lake Como. And I experienced some roughness of the water, and therefore I was inspired to write something. And right then and there, I did it in Italian. Well, I came back, I tried to translate it into English. I couldn't, so I wrote another poem on a similar matter, but it just doesn't work for me. So that answers it more than amply, right?
Oh yeah, thank you. It's so insightful to me. So one more question, and that is that uh, many of us have been with you through the last couple of years, and even I feel like you and I have evolved as poets together, and I'm wondering how you see your work has evolved since you first started coming when Tanu was hosting Belmont Poetry Night. That was your first foray, right, into meeting with the community of poets that you're in right now. Yeah. How do you see your work evolving?
This is a very interesting question, and I really have some peculiar feelings about it. There are some poems that I have written very early on, very early, like first year when I wrote. And I still think they are a lot better than a lot of other work that I wrote later. Don't ask me, maybe it shows that I haven't progressed. I don't know. Certainly the form has improved, and certainly I was getting a little bolder, yes. But honestly, I think it has more to do with how deeply I feel about some things than anything else, than the development. The development has been a shallow thing. It could also be explained by the fact that when I started writing, I was like an avalanche. I couldn't even stop myself. And it just seems to me that the impressions have brewed in me for a very long time, quite strongly. So that is why those early poems perhaps have more impact than the other ones, which are more sophisticated. But so it's very like, it's sort of like, I can compare it to rough architecture that can shake you up more than something refined and well thought through and designed with so much technology. Okay, if this answers your question, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. And all I can say is, whenever you start off a poem by saying, I'm not sure I'm supposed to say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway, those are my favorites. Thank you so much, and it's been wonderful so much to hear you read and to have so many wonderful people here to witness your reading. Thank you so much. So we're gonna go into our open mic. I'm gonna go ahead and put that the list in the chat, and I'm gonna kick us off actually. I'm super excited to announce that my book, Seven Skirts, is now available for pre-order. It's been a long time in coming, and many of the poems in here have been ones that I've tried out on you here. So I'll read one from the poem from the title, Seven Skirts. And it is one piece of a poem that goes through 7 skirts that I've worn through my life. And I chose this one. I had originally picked another one, but I chose this one because I'm really moved by the fact that your daughters are here. And so it's a poem about my relationship and my conversation with my mom. So this is number 6 skirt in the poem called 7 Skirts. 6. Stretch black travel skirt. I'm okay, I say, sitting careless and crisscross on hardwood, smoothing an invisible wrinkle in my lap, not twisting a tissue. I picture my mom's hands drying on a dish towel, to press the receiver to my loose rubber band voice that says it's true this time. She tells me her annual pap smear came back negative, that she sewed 5 more sundresses to send with the ladies from church to El Salvador. I tell her about the Craigslist sofa bed, open the box marked kitchen, pull out the only 2 pots I didn't leave with him, put them in the dark cupboard. Thank you. I'm gonna be so brazen as as Mirna inspired me to do. I'm gonna put the link for pre-order in the chat. But first, I shall put our list of readers. And up first is Ed Mycue. Thank you, Ed, for being here. You're up first.
Okay, here I am. Can you hear me? I suppose you can.
We can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me. Good. This poem is called Home in All the Rainbow Colors. Many of us could never go home, even when we had not left it. Home is a wind song in our hearts. These hearts have exploded, repositioned themselves, ending as much the men's themselves as the remainder hearts. This then is home. You don't need contrition for a condition. Maybe an explanation will do. Maybe it's an act, not a crime. You don't need permission to seek sublime. It's the condition. Don't ask vindication. Right in the dark. No negatives first. Follow your thirst. Trust intuition. It's the condition. We believed in progress in the basic goodness of all persons. There was a stranger inside of me, an intruder who was not me, yet part of me, who swallowed as I drank, and I've lived as he'll die when I die. I now begin to see that our strangers within us are the Sharpie fine pointed pens we thought we wrote, but really are the life forces who lead, encourage, and lift us through our nights. What this is sometimes baffles me very much. But this is not mythic, it is here now. We pass out of history, this life force continues. And while we live, we are stewards, mechanics, actors, helpers. Our actions matter, our thoughts matter. Our beginnings organize into this great net. Here is my mind's province. Beyond here, worlds have no cause looking back. Out there becomes then a here. From personal to political to spires, further and higher to travel. What was here then, there remains. Here now, resting time, still we see. Beyond circles is twisting, continuing, turning what was then backward, forward. Here returns, but not here's beginning. That word dream motion makes life glorious, puts raw silk to silence, gives music tongue, and reveals nature becoming the prairie garnet, leaving the wind behind, and remains and continues in all the rainbow colors. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful one to kick us off. Thank you so much, Ed. And thanks for being here as always. And next up we have Lois Freed.
Thank you, Jackie. And I just want to say I've been listening to Mirna since about October of 2018, and I'm always so inspired by her truth. I just to know that this is her life and she just puts it to words and it sounds like music to my ears. So thank you for this evening.
Thank you.
And I'm going to share a poem about my brother, and this will be my Black history, kind of thinking along those lines. So this is a poem I wrote this poem about 2 months after George Floyd, and I call it Little Black Boy. My brother lived a short life on this earth, dying from heart disease at the tender age of 17. He was a little Black boy who loved the skin he was born in. His love for life and living was in the smile that he woke with each day. He was a little Black boy who loved to do all the things little boys do who lived on a farm. He was handsome, quick-witted, funny, sharp, and mischievous. Sadly, others who could not see in his short life the joy he felt in the morning. They saw a Black inn boy, a Black thief, a Black coon. The saddle and tack store worker saw a little Black boy who he would give an evil eye if he touched the cowboy belts, the cowboy hats, and the shiny Black boots. My brother saw one-of-a-kind belt buckles, the Black cowboy hat with a slick leather band, and a whole wall of fancy boots. The movie theater attendant saw a Black boy who he signaled to go to the back entrance where he climbed the stairs to the balcony that was dark and dingy and smelly with torn seats and stale popcorn. My brother ate the stale popcorn, twisted in the torn seats, but smiled with joy of seeing the latest cowboy western on the big screen. The superintendent of schools saw a little Black boy who would never read well and never learn math. My brother looked forward to a fun ride on the school bus, going to the blackboard to do his arithmetic problems, and getting a smile from Mrs. Williams when he got it right. The sharecropper saw a little boy he could work like a man and pay him $1.25 a day for a day's work. My brother saw a day of adventure and discovery in the cotton, corn, and sugarcane fields that surrounded our little shotgun house. My big brother was strong, brave, and courageous. Facing open heart surgery at the tender age of 12, when little was known about heart disease. I am sad that he only lived life for a short time in a world that hated him just because of the color of his skin. But grateful that he took his own last God-given breath. Grateful that he never had a knee on his neck. Thank you.
Lois, I'm so grateful that you brought us this truth. I really appreciate your poem and the subject of your poem. That's so needed tonight. I was trying to decide where I might insert this here because I didn't want to interrupt the the flow of Mirna's evening, I feel like this is the perfect time. I'm going to just insert myself here to read this poem that I wanted to read, that I've read a few times before. It's by our San Mateo County poet, Chinedu Okobi. Chinedu Okobi, you may or may not know, was tased to death probably 3 years ago now by San Mateo County sheriff's deputies. Those deputies are still employed right now. The sheriff who employs them is still in office, and many of our elected officials are both supported by him, and he supports them as well. And so I believe it's a poet's job to speak truth to power. And so in this role, I would like to read this poem by Chinedu Okobi, his middle name is Valentine, and his birthday was this week. And if you look up his story, you will find that he was walking across the street in Millbrae, jaywalking, stopped by San Mateo County, right here where we live, deputies, and chased and brought to the ground by multiple tasings, which killed him. And it was determined to be a homicide. It was, and the county still denies it. Our Steve Wagstaff, who is our attorney, won't admit what the coroner's report says, that it was a homicide. So this is Only God Knows by Chinedu Okobi, and he's a spoken word artist, and this is to keep his words alive. I'm in tune with the cosmos, and only God knows the future of lost souls searching for peace on broken roads. I feel despair in the air when the wind blows, the world is cold. Nevertheless, I try not to get too high or get too low as my story unfolds. I'm dealing with trauma, struggling to stay alive in the jungle, still dreaming of a better tomorrow, experiencing joy and sorrows. But like the rose that grows through the concrete, I'm a miracle, and only God knows all that I've been through, and only God knows all that I've been through. Thank you for giving me the perfect space to read that and introduce this subject for this month. And next up we have Phil Harris. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you. As I often do, I was kind of waffling between two poems, one I wrote today and one I wrote previously. I had been experimenting with the Trente Sei form. And so you kind of made my choice because it sort of speaks truth to power, at least in my lights. Words piling upon words, like cumulus clouds growing to storms. Our first storm has already been heard. If we weathered it, sounded the alarm, while we watched neighbor or friend rage and riot, serious as death attend. Like cumulus clouds grow into storm, yet some will say no rain and no wind. No more than Greeks wrecking a dorm. Some died, were killed, cannot pretend. Despite what they did, what they said, oceans will rise long after we're dead. Our first storm has already been heard. The heat it may continue to grow. Don't laugh, say this all sounds absurd. It will depend on how our winds blow. How far inland will we need to retreat? Will the sea mark the end of our street? If we weathered it, sounded the alarm, when far too many guns fill our lives, rapid fire hate deals wholesale harm. future will learn, only tragedy survives. I hope and despair will find a way. A distant tomorrow, we need it today. While we watch neighbor or friend show how close our animal is to control, show us fools, barbarians who sinned, slandered ourselves, our anger to extol. Actions have consequence, it's no game. When some think violence, truth the same. Rage and riot, serious as death, attend. In the lie, white skin makes you better. Their heinous actions I must condemn. In future ruin, who becomes the debtor? Money won't worry about wind or fire. Will we ever learn power is a serial liar? And that's called Serious as Death, which I didn't say before going in.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thanks for following up with that poem. Beautiful. And next up we have Eric, aka Disclaimer.
I'm having some technical difficulties, so if you want to skip me, please do.
Okay, if you get fixed, just let me know. Next we have Jim Heritatus.
Hey, all right. Can you hear me now?
Hi, Jim. Welcome. We can hear you.
Hi. Okay. This is a poem that's based on a shelter in place, which has been an issue. So it's called Shelter. The room is dark. I hear the wind, the rain, the pounding thunder. I see the walls begin to move and feel the floor shift beneath my feet. The haze on nearby hilltop descends so slowly down the slope and slides and glides around each tree and bush that hug the falling land, like a child who clings to toys held closely to the chest, as though all the joys of life and love are wrapped in plastic, wood, and paper. The air is thick with stillness as light from rising sun gleams the tip of nearby peak. The view is challenged to my senses, and I watch the descending glow arouse the apartment block with creeping gleam that touches roofs and doors and sidewalks, where trees begin to scatter light that filters through the leaves. The moving mist is a pleasure to behold, a godlike vision that holds my breath and stirs my faithful eyes with views of beams and rays that transform my moment into a blessed lifetime of awareness and moves my thoughts to reverenced awe.
Oh, James, thank you so much for lifting us. Beautiful. I think Tanu had to go, but next up we have David Zeltzer. Hi, David. Welcome. So happy to have you here. And thanks for volunteering to read. We're happy to have you at Belmont Poetry Night.
Okay, thank you. It's great to be here, and I'm especially pleased to come and hear Mirna read. I've heard her at many other readings, and it's just really wonderful. So thank you. So I wrote this poem sometime early last month. I don't remember exactly when. It's called Think of the Sound. Think of the sound the airplane makes inside the gunshot, inside the city, the ashes, inside the sorrow, inside the starry memory you lost. Inside the gold breath I carry miles, to meetings of the dead I wound in sad machines beyond tongues, beyond aerobatic wives gnarled in sex in the mirror. Dogs pry loose the sword, arise with dagger. Oh, I thought I was muted. Dogs pry loose the sword, arise with dagger. Arise with stars to light your languid stream. Now flows this hour with rocks and lilies. Thank you.
Oh, so happy you messaged me to read for us so we could hear your voice here with us tonight. And I really appreciate it and hope you come join us again. We'd love to have you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And next up we have Peter Carroll. Hi, Peter. So glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Jackie. This has been a great night. Mirna, you were fantastic, really uplifting, wonderful. And Lois, I sent you a message, maybe directly. Don't lose it. Thank you too. My poem is called Rain. It rained last week, as you may remember. A hard wind blows off the sea, returns the rain. We can't have enough. Drought almost every year, but the sky opens today. Streets empty, only dutiful dog walkers must explore the wet. Most folks stay home. Nothing so important to tempt a departure. A day like this years ago, I came upon her. I'd been watching from a distance. She curled behind the wheel of a blue Dodge sedan, wiper blades keeping time to a poem she read aloud. I could tell she was experimental, though not impulsive. Has anyone else ever recorded the pulse of rain? She seemed like the type I was looking for. She waved me into the car as the rain tapped on the roof. She said, the rain has always been my friend, allowing her to bundle in sweaters, whatever the season. She loathed the naked outdoors. Just now I see her wistful at the front window. I suspect she's praying the rain never stops. We are kindred. I gather kindling for a fire. Maybe it will rain again.
Thank you, Peter. So good to see you here. Really, really appreciate it. And makes me happy every time you come to share your poems. Thank you. And next up we have Phyllis Klein.
Hi. Wonderful reading. Thanks so much to everyone, and especially Mirna. So this is it's a news story about a little boy that she was in. I think it's happened in this at the San Jose airport. A little boy who was having some terrible troubles in his home with his parents. I think he was being abused, and he just didn't know what to do. So this is what happened. It's called After Landing, He Awoke Praying for a New Home. Fury gave him courage to climb the airport fence. Not caring where he went, he crawled into the plane's wheel well. He didn't want to die, only to disappear. He felt the speed and lift off the ground, but was already detached from his body. His despair floated in the icy air like someone else's frozen tears. He fell asleep and his heart went into hibernation, a 15-year-old Arctic heart still beating at 35,000 feet. Maybe the anger saved him, like a blanket pulled close to his skinny body that kept some heat in. Maybe he still had just enough hope.
Oh, wow. Very moving. Thank you, Phyllis. Really good to see you here.
Yeah,
Good
same.
to hear your poems again. Thank you. And then finally, we have Carol Park. Carol, are you here? Yes. Hi, Carol.
Hello, everyone. It's been such a joy to be here. The last 3 months have been very terrible health-wise, so I'm glad that I'm strong enough to stay up and be with you tonight and hear all these wonderful words. I've been revisiting poems written 10 or 15 years ago and shining them up, and this is one of these. Through the fog. My friend and I leave lowlands for an ancient highway, skyline, on the ridge dividing land and ocean views. Gnarly limbs of oaks hang strands of shaggy moss over us. We talk of teens and husbands, how distant they've become. We reach a sweep of firs covering a slope. Green ends with an ocean of slate clouds. So like our talk. Questions tremble below careful covers. How to make midlife days into lasting art. When we make 60, who will brace our hearts? We park and hike through thin mist on a needled path while pondering peaks pushing up, soft blue of old China. Poison oak's leaves and bushy prickles loom, but skyscraping pines delight. Pink underparts of madrones show the way to peel off strips of our own bark. We come upon rocks with startling form and color, cut like white bricks, but tiny. They're set in perfect symmetry. A mystery mason's work. I steal one chunk to remind me of unplanned good, cut aright, aligned. How stone can play a part in beauty. We trek back and motor home. Gray sheets shrunk, sapphire sky.
Wow, beautiful one to bring us home here. Thank you, Carol. Thanks for being here and thanks for reading. Glad you're healthy enough to be here with us. I wanted to open the floor to disclaimer. I know you tried to log out and log back in. Do you want to see how should I check to see how you're doing there? Or are you still not able to read with us?
I think, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I had to reboot this computer.
No problem. What do you want to close us?
Sure. It's a bit of a downer, but
all right, we'll have to see what we can do about that. Go for it.
So this is called Inauguration Day. And just as a disclaimer, this is coming from the left, just so that people don't misconstrue. And the walls will not be coming down, and the prison doors shall not open, and the cages will not be dismantled. Anger's anvil will continue to sound. And toxic poisons won't escape the ground. The jobless will be no less disgruntled, and the wars will come to no end, and the drones will continue to bomb. And travel will still be restricted, and wages will still be constricted. The judges seated remain conflicted, and life shall be no rom-com. Lies will be told, oh, lies will be told. Lies will be told of lies told even. They'll still experiment There will be sanctions for the reviled, insecurities shall again be riled, and forest fires will further portend the end of faith in the fate of the wild. And the corporations shall acquire great wealth. But shall not the image be less defiled, the technocracy better to defend? There will be an absence of braggadocio as well as an absence of public health. Surveillance will persist in stealth, the speaker enjoy the cool pistachio, and the derivatives shall be bundled. Yea, the telecoms shall merge and divide, tax shelters let God-fearing assets hide, but the drones will continue to bomb, and the wars will come to no end, and the liberals will smile with aplomb.
Yes, thank you so much. It was such a timely poem, and I'm glad you were able to log back on to share that with us. So that brings us to the end of our evening. I do want to I'm just realizing that my dear friend Kathleen Beasley is here with us, and I'm not sure if any of you know this, but Kathleen was our beloved branch manager of the Belmont Library, and she just retired in January. And so it delights me no end to see you here, Kathleen. Your service to this community has been rich and so full of energy every time, and I will miss seeing you there, and I'm sorry we didn't have a last time to be able to meet together with you still at the helm, but it's great we can join each other here. And I think I would actually like to close with this poem for Black History Month by Nikki Giovanni, but also in honor of our libraries that we all miss being at and joining together in person, and seeing this Zoom gathering as a temporary way to be together, and looking forward to the time we can be back with each other in person. So this one is My First Memory of Librarians by Nikki Giovanni. This is my first memory. A big room with heavy wooden tables that sat on a creaky wood floor. A line of green shades, banker's lights down the center. Heavy oak chairs that were too low, or maybe I was simply too short for me to sit in and read. So my first book was always big. In the foyer, up 4 steps, a semicircle desk presided. To the left side, the card catalog. On the right, newspapers draped over what looked like a quilt rack. Magazines face out from the wall. The welcoming smile of my librarian. The anticipation in my heart, all those books, another world, just waiting at my fingertips. Thank you all so much for being here. Great to see you all. And also, I'm excited to announce that our next featured reader from our Poetry Night community, please don't miss it, next third Tuesday in March will be Lois Freed. So don't miss it. As you can see, she has so many wise and wonderful words to share with us, and we look forward to seeing you then. And thank you most of all to Mirna. It was beautiful to hear you read tonight. Thank you for bringing us your words, not only tonight, but over the years to our community. Thank you all, and we will see you next month.